In this video, let's take a look at how to use the chord track. So here is a simple chord progression I've got. Let me just play it through so you can take a listen to it. That's just an idea I had on the piano. On this track over here, I'm using an instance of Presence with an acoustic piano loaded up. And this is just playing over that drum beat idea that I had from the previous videos. Nothing amazing, but why I'm doing this is I want to show you how the chord track feature works. Up here, you've got the chord track icon, and this is going to open up the chord track lane, which is a global parameter, much like your marker and tempo lanes. And you can either turn it on or off. And this is turning on the follow mode. So once you've got chords within this chord track, when you turn this on, any tracks that are set to the follow mode will follow this chord track. But more about that in future videos. Now let me show you how this chord track can detect the chords from a MIDI note performance. So take this piano part and drag it up onto the chord track. And you'll see there that it's picked up the chords from within that MIDI data. So it's a very intelligent feature. But let's go in and see exactly how it did this. I'm opening up the melodic mode or piano editor. And for this first chord, I've got a D here, and then a D again, an F, and an A. So these three notes here are forming the triad of D minor, and then this is just the bass note. So these notes over here are just the notes that I'm playing with my left hand. I'm just playing the bass notes, and then these are the chords. Now, let me show you something else. This next chord, I've got a C, an E, and then an A. And when I drag this up, it picks up that this was an inversion of A minor. So for example, this is your typical A minor triad. You got A, C, and then E. But I used an inversion, and it intelligently picks up that it's an inversion and still gives you the correct chord. Now on to this next chord over here. Let's see what we got. We got a B flat, then a D, then an F, and then a G. So it looks quite strange, but if you drag this back down to the G over here, you can see you've got your G minor 7th. But this as well is just an inversion. When I dragged it up, it picked up the G minor 7 in its inversion position. And also on the inspector over here, if you just open this up, this is showing you your chords that are depicted in the chord track. So as you build up more chords within your song, these chords are just going to list down here showing you all the chords in your song. Now you can also choose a key signature for your song. Now I know that this is the first chord in my song, plus it is the key. So I could go in here and set it to a different key if I wanted. Maybe the song's in F, but I know that it's in D minor. So I'm just clicking on this chord selector here to make sure that I've set the correct key signature for my song. So that's pretty cool. You can take your MIDI note data and interpret what chords are being played, and then it gives you the visual display of the chords for your performance. Now next, we're going to take a look at how you can do some chord substitutions by using this chord track. Catch you in the next video. In this video, I want to take you through how you can use the chord track and use chord substitution by taking a chord and using a different one. Now, the powerful thing about this chord track is that it has a tool called the chord selector that can help you with your chord progressions. And you can bring up this chord selector by double clicking on one of the chords, and then it brings up the chord selector. And you might be familiar with this view over here. This is the circle of fifths going in a clockwise direction, or the circle of fourths in a counterclockwise direction. So just to give you a little bit of music theory, this course isn't going to cover music theory, but let's just have a little bit over here just to cover the circle of fifths. On this top circle here, you have the circle of majors, and every step to the right is a fifth apart. And this tool works well in determining what chords can potentially go well together. For example, the chords that are nearest to it will play well together. So for example, if you go from C to G, then to D, then back to G, those chords are a close relation and work well together. Similarly, if you go from C to F going in a fourth direction, then B flat, back to F. So it's just a nice visual way of seeing where you can go with your chords and build up chord progressions. And in this inner circle over here, you've got the relative minor of the key. So A minor is the relative minor to C. This is doing the same thing. It's going from A minor to the fifth of that gives you the E minor. And similarly, the same steps apply with this inner circle. Then you have your different chord types. You got your major, minor, diminished, augmented, your suspended second and your suspended fourth, and then your power chord. And what you can basically do is you can take the chord that you've chosen and change its properties. So see, this is D minor here. Now if I click major, it changes it to a D major. And while I'm doing that, I just want to show you something. I want to leave this here and just open up this track in the piano editor. Let's go back to the chord selector. Let's go back to minor and just keep an eye on here as I change these. If I go to major, you can see it's shifting the chord there. So this chord track is looking at the piano and changing it accordingly. And this is determined by the follow mode. So if we just scroll down to this piano track, on the left over here, you've got a follow mode. So this is choosing how it's going to follow the chords that are in the chord track. I'm not going to go through these modes right now. I just want to first show you that by default, it'll be off, and then you can set it to mode. So if you set to parallel, when you go back to your chord selector and you make any changes, it's going to reflect in the chord that's following the chord track. And with this chord selector, you can actually substitute chord changes within your chord progression. If you're looking at my chord progression here, here is the first part. It's going the D minor to the A minor to the G minor seventh. Then I'm repeating that same chord progression over here. But to make it interesting, let's try out some chord substitution on this last chord here. So it just makes it a bit more interesting. So let's open up this chord selector again. And I just want to quickly go over, before we change the chord, what's on the right over here. So when you select your chord, it's giving you the roots of the chord. You can change this if you want to. And then you've also got the different intervals. So if I click this off, it gives you a G minor, but I had this as a seventh. And let's just keep an eye on the MIDI notes over here. So you can see as I'm changing from sixth to seventh, it's changing the sixth degree and seventh degree of the chord. I can make it a major seventh, so that's going G minor major seventh. Then you've also got a flat 9, a flat 11, a sharp 11, a flat 13, and a 13. So you can really build up some complex chords by taking a chord, selecting it, and then choosing the type and then the interval. And you can also choose what your bass note is. Let's say you actually want to choose your bass note to be the F. But let's just leave it at the G for now. Okay, so let's talk about what we can possibly substitute this for. Let's change it to something a bit more interesting when it gets to this second cycle of this chord progression. And what I think will work quite nice is a B flat. So if you're looking here, what I'm actually doing is it's going D minor, A minor, then jumping to G minor. Then the second pass of that, I want it to actually jump up to its relative major of the minor. So let me give you a taste of this. Let's play this back. Now listen to the next part. Pretty cool, eh? And let's try something else out. So we're going G minor, D minor, then A minor. How about if we went to the E minor? And we'll keep it set at a seventh. Let's take a listen now. I don't think that works. It's going actually too far out from the chord progression. You can see it's jumping from G minor to E minor, and that's just too far away with relation to the chord. Let's try one more. Let's say it changed to C minor seventh. So this pass is now going to go to the C minor seventh instead of the G minor seventh. Let's take a listen to this. That's pretty interesting. But this does bring something else that I want to talk about, and that's to stick to chords that are within the scale. So this is talking about the scale degree within a scale of chords. So looking at this diagram here, we're dealing with a minor key. So when you're dealing with a minor, your first chord is a minor chord, your second is the diminished, your third is a major, your fourth is a minor, your fifth a minor, your sixth a major, and then your seventh degree a major. So going by that, a C minor is probably not going to work. So let's try a C major seventh. So this is a chord within the D minor scale. So it's going 1, 5, 4, 1, 5, 7. Let's check this out. That's not quite right. So as you can see, it's a bit of hit and miss, but that's why I quite liked the B flat major. So this is the sixth degree of the scale, but I quite liked it when it went from the A minor and jumped to that. So it's a bit of trial and error when you're selecting these chords, but it is nice that you can just quickly choose between them and play through and hear how it sounds. So again, let's take a look at this with the B flat seventh. Awesome. So that's pretty cool. So I know we had a bit of hit and miss there in this video showing you how to use this chord selector, but hopefully you're getting a good idea on how powerful this tool is. You can come up with a simple chord progression and then go back into it, make sure your instrument is set to the follow mode, and then test out different chord types and different intervals on the chord, and hear what works and how you can create extra interest by just changing up some of the chords within a chord progression if, for example, it does another cycle like this. It does help knowing some music theory. For example, I showed you the different scale degrees of a scale and what chords fitted within it. But there's no reason you can't just play through and loop it through and try out different chords and see what sounds nice. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can vary up your chords and make use of these different intervals to build up more complex chords. Check you in the next video. Now in this video, I want to show you how you can change the quality of the chord. And when I'm talking about the quality, I'm meaning the complexity of the chord. So by adding extra intervals or changing up the type to move it away from your standard major and minor chords. On this last chord over here, I changed it to a B flat 7. But if you actually take a look at the MIDI over here, there isn't actually a seventh part on it. It's actually just playing a B flat. And I'll get to that now. But if I change this back to a G minor 7th, it's actually just missing some notes. It's only got 3 notes in here. So you've got the B flat, the D, and then the G. So if I bring this G back down, the 7th would actually be the F. Now, if I go and change this to a B flat 7th, this sounds correct. Now that brings me to the next thing on when you're adjusting the complexity or making more complex extended chords. If you've only got 3 notes to work with, let's just bring this up and take that back to a G minor 7th and bring the G back up here to the different inversion. So you've got this. Now, if you want to take that G minor and let's say make it a 6, it's not changing anything about the chord or a major 7th. So you actually need extra MIDI notes to make a more complex chord. If you've only got 3 MIDI notes, you can basically only change between the type, which uses the 1st degree, the 3rd degree, and the 5th degree of a chord to change it up to these different types. But here's my little trick. If you want to play a more complex chord or extended chord, add in an extra note. Doesn't matter where it is. So just take a note and just add it somewhere. So now you've got 4 notes. Now if you go back here and you click G minor 7th, it shifts that note to the 7th. Now let's say you want to make it an 11th. Let's add in another note and choose the 11th. And then it moves to match the notes on an add 11th chord shape. So when you're making your complex chords, especially when you're getting into 7ths and 9ths and 11ths and 13ths, just add an extra note so you're filling up the amount of notes needed within that chord to make it up. So that gives you a good idea now on how to do some chord substitutions and then how to use more complex chords and change the interval types. And this is all working with following the chord track when the tracks are set to a follow mode. And currently, I've just been showing you using parallel mode. Now, let's explore this more with some extra instruments and show you how these follow modes work with different instruments. Now, over this piano part, I want to add an arpeggiating lead synth line. And this is going to be a great way to also demonstrate how the follow chord function works with the chord track. So I've just played in this part over here, just goes like this. And it just repeats throughout the part. So I'm just going to play this back and you'll hear how it's just the same line going throughout all these bars. Take a listen. All the same. So the chords are changing, but not this R pattern. Now let's take a look at how this chord follow mode works with this ARP pattern. So on this ARP track, let's go to follow chords and choose parallel. Now see how it's shifted all those notes. Let's take a listen to that. That's pretty cool. I just want to minimize this so you can see this more clearly. So there we got the MIDI notes, and then let's increase this as well. So that's just using the parallel mode. Now let's go through these other modes and see how they work and see if we can figure out what's actually happening. So we're going to turn this back to off, brings the notes right back to where they were. Now let's choose narrow. So it's shifted the notes slightly differently. Now let's check out the last mode and then I'll explain to you the difference between the different modes. Here's bass. So can you figure out the difference? Let me explain these to you. So in parallel, the chords are shifted in parallel. So they're aligning the root note of the chord with the root of the target chord. Now, in narrow, the notes are shifted to the nearest note within the chord. So they're sitting in a more narrow range because it's just taking the notes and shifting them to the nearest note within that chord. And then the bass mode. This is more specifically for monophonic bass parts. So it acts like a bass guitar, but basically all the notes are shifted to the bass note of the chord. So you can see that's on D, then that jumps all the way up to A, that jumps down to G, and then back down to D. Now, especially with this ARP line, it doesn't make sense for it to be jumping all over the place. So I quite like the narrow setting. The only thing is that these notes over here have jumped to the same notes, and that doesn't really sound good. Check this out. So what you can actually go do is you can set your notes or lead lines or melody lines to follow the chords and then go in and edit it. So take and listen to this part. I want to be... Let's take a listen there. Yeah, that's cool. So it's not necessarily shifting it to a note on the chord. That's actually a note from a previous chord. But melodically, it's making quite a lot of sense. And it sounds interesting. Let's take a listen through the whole pass. That's awesome. So this really works well, especially if you've got an idea and you can't quickly play it out following the chords. Just record that idea in and then set the follow mode on the instrument, and then it'll follow those chords and seamlessly give you a part that's now in key with your chords. So that's really the beauty of chord tracks. And when you start building up your instrumentation, you can get all the instruments to follow this chord track. I find it really helps speed up my workflow. Let's just take one more listen. Let's do a chord substitution and see what happens. Let's do something quite drastic. Let's open this up and let's maybe go for something completely across the scale. So that's a G minor. Let's go for a G flat minor. Let's see what happens here. That's pretty weird. And another thing to point out, there's no reason you can't actually go in and edit your chord tracks. So let's put something in. Let's get the pen tool and let's draw something in here. So we've added in a new chord to our chord track. And let's make this go back to G minor 7th. So take a listen to this. So I'm not saying that works, but what you can see is really key in this whole composing and using the composing tools within Studio One is experimentation. So what I wanted to do right over there is go very far away from the root key. So that's why I went completely across the spectrum to the G flat minor. Now this works well if you've got a song that's sort of going along and everything sounds nice and you just want to catch the listener's attention. Then throw in a key that's completely off or very far away from its closest sort of relative key, and then you can always come back again. And like I showed you, you can always go in and edit and add in extra chords within this chord track, and everything that's set to follow will follow it. Awesome. That's working really cool. Now next up, I want to show you other ways that you can work with the chord track. Remember I showed you patterns and talked about melodic patterns that can follow chord tracks. Let's take a look at that next. In this video, I want to show you how you can build up a bass part by using patterns, and then how the bass track can follow the chord track, and then the pattern part will follow along, creating an interesting bass part for you. So in the previous videos, I've shown you how to use patterns, and then also how this chord track works, plus how the follow mode works by setting it to a different mode so that it follows along and adjusts accordingly compared to what chord is playing. Now on this song, I've just gone in and added a few more extra things. You saw up to this B flat over here, and this is sort of my verse section. I've also added in a little bit of a pre-chorus and then into what is going to be my chorus section over here. If I click on the chord track, you can see the chords that are now within that song. Let me just play this through for you, and then I'll show you how to build up the bass part. And you can also watch here the chords that are being played. This is going to be the pre-chorus over here. I've got a G over C, then a D minor, an F, and then F over D, and then F over A. Then it jumps to a major D, with a slight variation. Awesome. So that's what I've come up with my song so far. Don't worry too much about this end section here going from a D minor to a D major. I'm going to talk more about that in a later video. But let me show you first now how you can make a bass part from patterns and how you can do it very quickly. So remember when I said if you've got your left and right locator set, and then you hold down Option or Alt and double click a track, it'll create a pattern for the whole length of the left and right locator section. Now on this bass part in the pattern, I know that my track is starting off with D, and I'm going to use a bass part that's playing every 16th. And it's going to work really well in the synthwave style. It might not necessarily work with every style, but let me just show this to you. So this is going to be my bass part. Okay, so you can hear that it's just playing that D and nothing's changing. Now let's go to the follow mode, and now let's use the bass mode. And now remember that the bass mode is good for monophonic instruments such as a bass guitar. So it's going to take the bass notes and get it to follow the bass notes within the chord track. So let's set that follow mode to bass, and now let's take a listen to hear what it sounds like. And just before I play, you can see how the pattern has adjusted accordingly over here. If I just expand this up, and by now increasing this track out, you can now see the changes with the notes within this pattern. But on the pattern, it's still just picking up the D. So let's take a listen and see what actually happens. Following along perfectly. awesome. I'm not going to play through the whole thing there, but that's working really well. And did you see how quick that was? So I built up my chord progression, then I just created a pattern and wrote the root notes on the pattern mode and then chose the follow mode, and it immediately created this whole bass part that's following the chords for me. And even better, you could go in and even accent notes. So let's accent the 1st, the 5th, the 9th, and let's leave the 13th off. So now you've got this. Actually, let's accent that. And maybe let's change some of the velocities. Do something interesting like this. Let's put these higher. Yeah, it's pretty cool, but I actually quite like it with less varying velocities on the instrument. And if you wanted to make the part even more interesting, you could even try the probability factor, where sometimes the note plays, sometimes it doesn't. And this will really just give you an interesting bass part that's changing all the time. That's awesome, eh? So it really just helps you speed up your workflow and just get moving with the composing and songwriting. So that's how to take your bass parts, make patterns of them, and then get them to follow the chords within the chord track. Now, next up, let's take a look at how you can transpose these chords. In this video, let's take a look at how we can transpose our chords within a section. Now, a popular technique to use in a song is for it to play through a pass and then to transpose either up or down. Sometimes if you're transposing up, it just gives this sort of uplifting feeling to the song and pushes it up and takes it further and just gives it a bit more extra journey on that song. Now, if I wanted to do that, let's say this is my second verse and it plays through this first pass, and on the second pass, I wanted to transpose this. Let's say I want to transpose it up 3 semitones. Then I'd sort of have to click on the chord. I'd have to click on here, and that's D. So going up 3 semitones will go to F. So then I need to select F, and that was a minor. So I'd have to select a minor, and so on for the rest of the parts that want to be transposed up. But let me show you a quicker and easy way to do this. Just right click on the chord and choose transpose chord. Then press 3 to transpose up, or -3 to transpose down. But we want to go up 3 semitones, so let's do that, and let's do the same for these chords and this chord as well. Awesome. So let's play through, imagining now that this is the second verse. It's going to run through these 4 bars here and then transpose up on these 4. Now take a listen. Awesome. That works pretty cool. And that was really easy to do. Without this chord track, you'd have to go through each part and transpose up or take the MIDI and shift it up 3 semitones. So for example, you'd have to go into this Mata instrument, select your notes that you wanted, and then move them up 3 semitones. But it's way simpler with the chord track by just selecting the chord, transposing up, and choosing a different transposition. Let's just try it again, this time by going down. So we're going to go down 3 semitones. And let's take a listen to that. going pretty funny with the -3 semitones, but I quite liked the +3 semitones. So let's just do that again and see how quick and easy this really is. It just really works well. And there we go. That's it. So if you've got a section of your song that you want to transpose, just go to each chord, right click and choose transpose. And like I said, by jumping up semitones, it can give a sort of uplifting feeling in the song, just giving it that extra jump before it goes into the next chord progression, for example, just giving it that lift. So as you can see, you've got quite a bit of flexibility with your MIDI data and the chord tracks and the patterns. In the past, before any of these features, you'd have to do a lot of MIDI editing to get where you wanted to go. But now, using these tools for your composing, you can really speed up your workflow and get more efficient with your songwriting. So now that you're happy with the chords and the patterns, let's move on and take a look at what you can do with audio events and the composing tools available. So we've looked at using the chord track with MIDI events, but it works just as well with audio, which is pretty amazing. Let me show you in this video how it works. So I've recorded in these guitar bits over here, and I've recorded them to the same drum pattern over here. Take a listen to this. So nothing amazing there, and you're probably going to hear that it's the same chords that we've been going over throughout this series. But let's say you've recorded in an instrument on an audio track, for example, a guitar track, and you don't know what the chords are. This is where the detect chords feature is really handy. So let me show you how this works. I'm just going to expand the height of this guitar track. And now if you right click on a part and then go to the audio subcategory, you can choose detect chords. So this analyzes the part and you'll see that it places the names of each chord on this audio. And there's a big thing that I just want to point out here. This hasn't added the chords to the chord track. It's just on this audio part. So it's event-based, not global-based. Now, if I double click on this to open up the audio editor, you can see down here in this lane, you've got the chords for the different parts in this track, which is a guitar part. One thing that I've sort of noticed that happens is it doesn't always pick up the correct transients or where the chord changes are. So if you just take a listen to this, so it's saying the A minor starts over here, but when in fact there's actually the chord change at bar 38. So this is not a problem. You can easily just grab this and drag this in to adjust the chord changes. So you might just need to do this, but this is just a great way of neatening up everything. For example, this one here, it's not on the bar, so let's just drag it across. Same with this A minor again over here. And in this B flat, you can drag that out and extend it. Awesome. So now it's detected the chords for this track. You can do the same for another audio part. Remember, you just go to the audio subcategory and choose detect chords. And just remember to go in and just make sure that the chords are changing at the correct area for the respective part. Bring that one in, and that looks all good. So even though that this is event-based, there's no reason why you can't take this audio part, which has detected the chords, and drag it up into your chord track to generate chords on your chord track for that part. So now this is working as the same way as the MIDI. With the MIDI, you had MIDI data that represented chords. You could drag it up to the chord track and it displays the chords for you. The same with this audio part now. It has analyzed the audio and then given you data back on the chords, and you're dragging the part up and you're creating a chord track for those chords from the audio that it's analyzed. Now, let's say that you want these chords to follow a different chord. So just remember that we recorded in these as the audio part. Now let's go set the follow mode for these tracks. Now there's just one thing that is slightly different with audio. For the follow mode, you get two extra options. You've got scale and universal. Now scale is where the notes in the chord are snapped to the nearest scale notes in the target chord. So let's try this out for these parts. And for the same for guitar 2, let's use scale. You'll also notice on audio tracks, you've got a tune mode. Now here, you can choose what type of instrument it is. So this is a guitar part, and I'm going to choose guitar as the tuning mode. So this is just going to use this as a reference as to how to retune the part to match up with the chord track. And just do the same with the tune mode for this track over here. So let's say that you want this to actually be a D major. Click on this to now bring up the chord selector and choose D major. Now if you take a listen, and then it's going to go to the minor over here. Okay, that was quite subtle. Let's maybe do something different. Let's take this chord and let's maybe change this A to something very different, like an E minor. Let's see if this works with the follow modes with the chords. That's pretty different, eh? And then let's say this chord, let's change it to a G flat minor. So we're really doing some drastic things here, but what I'm trying to show you is that even though you've recorded in an audio part, you can actually make changes to it later within your composing. And this was really hard to do before when there weren't tools like this available. If you wanted to change the chord and you had audio tracks, you'd have to go in and re-record the part. Now you can just simply make the change in the chord track, play back, and it picks up those changes. Now let's try another follow mode. So maybe instead of scale, where it's quickly pushing it to the nearest scale, let's try narrow. This is going to make a big difference to the sound. So take a listen. Very drastic. So let's get that back to what it was. So D minor, so it's A minor, and then that was D minor. Take a listen again. And the other option with the follow mode is universal. Now, with universal, this doesn't require the chords to be detected on the audio part. You can force notes to the scale notes in the chord. Now, let me show you this. I'm going to right click on this part and say remove chords. So that's under audio and remove chords. So we have no idea what these chords are, but we want to force this to follow the chord track. So let's do something here. Let's first play through. Let's just turn the follow mode off. So pretending we don't know what the chords are, we can go to follow mode, universal, and make some changes to the chords. And even though it doesn't know what the chords are, it's going to force it to it. Let's try an F there. And let's take away the seventh and make it a power chord. And guitars work really well with power chords, so why not change these all to power chords? and hear what it sounds like. That's pretty cool. I'm just going to undo those changes. So it's really a powerful feature. You can take your audio parts, detect the chords in them, or even if you don't know the chords, you can force them to snap to the chords within the chord track. Now, let me show you just one last little cheat that I like using this for. I'm going to scroll back in my song. I've got this section here that we've been working with: D minor, A minor, G minor, and then on the second part, the B flat. Now, if I write a chord progression and then I quickly want to lay in a guitar part, what I like to do is just quickly just play the same note over and over again, and then I'll force it to the chord track. So check this out. This is the guitar part, and I'm just going to make sure that first there's no follow chords going on. So here's the guitar part. So it's just playing the D minor over and over again. Now check this out. We can detect the chord. So there we go. It's just a D minor. Detect the chord over here as well. Another D minor. Now let's go into the follow modes. This we can choose narrow, tune mode, guitar. This one, narrow, guitar. And now when we play back, then if we listen to it with the rest of the track, awesome. So how easy was that? You just take one guitar part or one instrument, just play the same chord over and over again, and then when you set the follow modes, it'll follow or force itself to the chords within the chord track. So that's just showing you some of the flexibility you have with audio and the chord track and the follow modes, and how it can really help speed up your composing workflow. I'd highly recommend this, especially if you're working with audio. I know in the past, working with audio, I always used to be scared that if I wrote a song and then made some changes, I'd have to go in again and edit or re record that audio. Now it's pretty seamless that you can just make these changes when you want to, and your audio parts will all match up with the rest of the parts in your song.